afternoon and welcome back to GSC Executives podcast with your host, Caitlin Tye. And today we're excited to have on Ruth Todd, who is the former Chief Commercial Officer at HS2. How are you today, Ruth?
Great. Thanks, Caitlin. It's a real pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you on here. So jump straight into it. So could you give me a brief elevator speech about your career to date?
Sure. And I guess I've been around a little bit, so it probably makes sense to do that, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. I spent 14 years in the automotive sector to start with. Mm-hmm. It's quite a long time ago now, I suppose, but I worked in production. So I ran production. I ran logistics for a number of factories. I built some factories because I'm a manufacturing engineer. That's my sort of degree, I suppose, all that time ago. And then moved into strategy and finally, and sort of through that time running procurement. So that explains, I guess, how I end up in commercial. Mm-hmm. After that, I then ran a consultancy for a while, again, focusing on logistics, supply chain, operations, had a number of people doing some interim work and consultancy work across the industrial sector. So working with aerospace, defense, worked in automotive, of course, heavy industrial, and then some retail work. So I did some really cool things with companies like Hotel Chocolat and Marks and Spencer's and people like that. So it really is quite a broad base.
You put your fingers in many pools, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I guess there's things that I'm knowledgeable about that are common across most sectors.
Yes.
And consequently, you can apply that knowledge in different places. And so for the last 9 years, I've been employed. I did something a little bit different to start with and worked for a staffing company running a productivity division for them and building a new business for them. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I went back to Land Rover, where everything started for me, and helped them with their inbound supply chain that was, as a result of their growth, needed a refresh. Mm-hmm. Went to Babcock and ran the Army's support supply chain. So the Army has 61 different bits of kit, from a tiny explosive ordnance device through to a Challenger main battle tank. And we did all the supply for that. So keeping those bits of kit in service, which was fun.
Yeah, I can imagine.
From there, I started public service. So I went and worked for the Submarine Delivery Agency. So you see, cool kit. I told you earlier, cool kit is the sort of general thing. So submarines definitely qualify. They are genuinely complex. There are some things I bought I still don't really understand the engineering of. There's commercial director, and that organisation both buys new submarines, but also supports those that are in service at the moment. And from there, I got picked up during COVID to help with the COVID efforts across government, and ended up as programme director at the vaccine taskforce. Yeah, so getting supply of vaccine for the UK. Well, to start with, I was also helping with I was leading the conversations about how we distribute it to people, because there are 4 nations involved in the UK. Health's a devolved matter, so we worked with Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and England in how they were going to deploy. And we can say that the Americans took our strategy, which was quite cool.
Nice little pack.
But the big part there was gaining supply of a vaccine, and we had 25 projects running, I think, at peak. And then once we'd got enough vaccine in and everybody had at least their first vaccine, I then moved across to HS2. And have been Chief Commercial Officer there for the last 2.5 years. The world's best project that is most disliked by the media. It divides the nation. And I always say I went from the country's favourite project, supply of vaccines, to the one that divides the country. And I think that's sort of that's where my career has currently landed.
Yeah, there's always a post on LinkedIn about it. Always pops up, always on the news. Yeah.
Inside there, it's a fantastic programme. You know, so that there is a contrast, isn't there, to the way it affects the public and the way people feel about it, and how the programme is actually being delivered on the ground. And there's some fantastic stuff going on. So it was a privilege.
It's never going to be smooth sailing. With any project that you do, it's big or small. So
and affects so many people. You know, splits the country as you're building this new current motorway, soon to be a railway.
It'll get there. So kind of what made you decide to work in the commercial side in the business?
So supply chain is kind of the thing that I've always found interesting in every role that I've done, and understanding the framework of things that make supply chains work. So commercial is one name for it. Supply chain director is another. Procurement is another. It has lots of different titles. Yeah. But that framework and network of supply, the things that add together to allow us to do the things we want to do.
Yeah.
If you're a client organization, you're buying most of it. If you're an organization that's building or adding value yourselves, then you're trying to have the ingredients coming in that allow you then to distribute that product onwards. Those links that sit outside the core of manufacturing, I've always been interested by. Inside the factory, I was always about the factory flow, and how you make the factory work itself, and this kind of extends outside. So yeah, it's what I've always been interested in, and that leads you to the commercials that make that happen, how you engage the supply chain, but it also leads you to how you therefore make those products available for customers.
Yeah,
and that whole chain,
the supply chain.
Yeah, funnily enough.
So what would you say is your biggest achievement in your career?
Well, it's kind of hard to get over the vaccine job, isn't it, really? It was a world first, and Margaret Keenan, being vaccinated in Coventry, which is really close to my home, on the 8th of December in 2019. Just to take you back. I do. I remember being there at that moment. Actually, for me, the days leading up to that had been the ones that had been most pressurised, because making sure the vaccine was out there and everyone had everything they needed to make that first injection was the big thing. But that was the moment for me. And a culmination of so much work. And so many people did so many amazing things to make that happen. And to be there and right in the middle of all that was just, fantastic achievement, and something I can't help but be proud of, and thank so many people for making happen.
And well, as you said before, the fact the Americans copied as well.
Well, that was our deployment. Yeah, we took some things from them too. Some things from there was really interesting international collaboration. So yeah, there were some countries I'm not surprised they were very slow to vaccinate when you spoke to their leadership. I'm like, wow, okay, I think we need to give you guys extra help. But yeah, we were very active, both making sure we'd protected our nation, but also that we were playing our part internationally.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. It's quite fun.
Especially with it obviously being kind of the first global pandemic in our lifetime, it's not as if it's kind of happened before, so you can take ideas from, well, obviously pandemics have happened before.
No, true. But there were a lot of things that there are parallels with. So for me, it was like a massive product launch. And in automotive, you do probably 2 of those a year. So you're kind of very used to the things you need to do to launch.
Yeah.
There was a lot of supply chain management, a lot of supplier management, a lot of supplier relationship management. There was a good portion of how we set the commercials up. So it still used those core skills. And then we put a rainbow team together with folk from different capabilities. So we had people from the pharma industry who had deep knowledge of how manufacturing worked, or how you regulate and how you get accredited a drug, through to consultants and contractors who'd got, skill sets in project management or in commercial, through to civil servants who understood how to make government work. And we put all those ingredients together to be able to do vaccines. So there's a lot of parallel with normal life and things that you've learned along the way.
Yeah. And just obviously applying it to that
particular imperative.
No pressure. So would you be able to explain some of your personal professional goals which you want to achieve within the next 5 years?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's 5 years or not, but there are 4 areas I think at the moment I'm interested in looking at and developing. So in every job you've got core outputs you're trying to achieve, and that's never taken away. You've got to make sure delivery happens. You've got to make sure that the outcomes of the organisation you're working with are achieved. But on top of that, at the moment, I'm a bit addicted to AI and machine learning. I was really into Industry 4.0 when it first came out. I've been watching the development of it. I kind of love to think about those new technologies and how we can apply them. So I'm looking at generative AI at the moment and just understanding genuine application of it rather than its potential. So that's kind of a real interest of mine. And I guess along the same lines, automating process is another thing that I feel really compelled to make happen, because we need to do more with less. Because the next on my list is about talent. We don't have enough people to do the stuff we need to do. So we need to take away the routine things so that people can focus on the stuff that really needs human intervention. So that'll move on to talent acquisition, dealing with the labour shortages that we see, seeing how we bring through young folk and early careers and people who are changing careers so that they can enjoy this profession as much as I do and get inspired by doing the sort of things I do. and helping them become better and the best that they can be, bring their best person to work. So, and that's built on capability. So that there has to be a framework people operate with. You'll hear me use framework quite a lot. It's something that you might call it operating model, I guess, as well.
Yes.
But I do believe you need some foundation stones to build upon, and setting those foundation stones is pretty important when you're looking at talent acquisition and growth of people's capability. Next, I'll probably talk about ESG, sustainability, and the carbon agenda, particularly what's happening in terms of climate change is really close to my heart.
Yeah.
So that I think we have to all be cognizant of in everything that we do.
Yeah.
But I'd attach to that some of the other benefits you can get out of contracts. So one of the things and it's really working in the public sector that opened my eyes to this, is just how much benefit we can make to the nation without it costing us very much. So
always handy.
Well, it's true though, and there are a lot of things that we don't even realise we're delivering. So apprenticeships and job starts for people who are long-term unemployed don't actually cost any more than if you're bringing someone into work who's already skilled but is going to be transient, and you're going to see a large turnover of those individuals. So you can make the equations work to do really good things. So trying to build that ESG agenda without it costing money, without it being high effort, improving diversity and inclusivity, obviously, that's right in the core of that and the heart of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's another bit of the 4 things that I'm looking at over the next few years about how we grow that agenda with low effort, low cost, but high impact. And then last but not least, the sort of heart of everything I do, which is supply management. So I think that I've observed, particularly in the last few years, that we're really smart about how we set contracts up. We're not quite as smart about managing them through their life cycle.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about life cycle management, and the environments I've been in, we've talked about that. Do I genuinely believe we're smart at that? No. So trying to make sure we're looking at total cost end to end, and enduring outputs and obligations and outcomes from contracts is the other thing that's on my agenda at the moment. And that's only done by great relationships in the supply chain, by genuine collaboration. Collaboration is gritty. It's not an easy conversation. It's something that means you've got to be very able to talk about the tough stuff as well as the fluffy stuff, and just making sure we're getting value for money throughout the life of all our services, contracts and products that we're buying.
Just making sure it's as efficient as possible and not
efficient and effective. Yeah. Value comes in many forms.
Of course. So obviously kind of talking about your achievement before with the vaccine. On the flip side of that, what would you say is the biggest challenge that you've had to face during your professional career?
So I've been working an awfully long time, and I guess the one, and being female, maybe it's something that's special to me. I think increasingly probably is more broad, but was bringing up my kids. Oh, so I've got 2 boys who are now 21 and 25, and that I love working. I've always loved working. I've worked all my life, and being a good mum and balancing that career is pretty challenging.
Life balance, isn't it?
I kind of worked out you don't look for balance. It's just pointless. You just need to learn forgiveness quite quickly.
Yeah.
And I did learn to compartmentalize quite a lot as well, so that I live in the moment. So when I'm at work, I'm genuinely it's all about work.
Focus, yeah.
And when I'm at home with the boys, then there's some boundaries around that. So I think that's the hardest thing, is that when you've had quite a varied, interesting career and you've done things that are really absorbing, you've then got to balance that with making sure that you're a good person and you're contributing more broadly. And that sort of was the thing that I had to be conscious about, I suppose.
Yeah, because I feel that it's obviously everyone takes work home with them and things like that, but then it's like you need time to relax for yourself as well. It can't just be constantly working as much as sometimes. Because I find I'm quite a perfectionist in the sense that I can't leave something till the next day. I have to get it finished on the same day. And it's kind of learning to be like, no, like you've done it.
It's okay.
Yeah. I get it from my mum, and my mum's always telling me, Caitlin, just stop. But then she'll be kind of working away doing the same thing. So no, I definitely agree with you there.
Yeah.
So obviously you mentioned, well, with being obviously a female in a very male-dominated business, how would you say this has affected you?
I'm not sure it's affected me very much, but I suppose the I mean, if I think about my early career, there were really not very many women at all. I think there were 12,000 people on site at the first automotive plant I worked at, and there were 3 female managers, of which I was one. So that was my early sort of experience. And I come from a farming background.
Right.
My mum was the farmer, pretty unconventional. My grandma, during the war, ran all of the transport in mid Wales. So I come from this group of, and my aunt is a very successful businesswoman. I come from a group of women that are used to doing stuff that's a bit unconventional, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I know imposter syndrome is something that a lot of people suffer with. I don't really suffer with it because I've always expected that I'd just go and do stuff. So
yeah,
I have experienced some pretty undiverse behavior and I've had some pretty horrible things happen over time, but I think I'm quite a strong person and I would never, I will call it out always.
Yeah.
And I would never expect to treat someone the way that I was treated in my early career. So I'm very keen on promoting good behavior and promoting how we can do things and being enabling rather than focusing on things that are tough and hard and the barriers.
Yeah.
And I have to learn how to do that. It's one of the things as a senior woman that you become really aware of very quickly. During my early career, it was just about beat down the next barrier and let's make sure we're moving on. And yes, fascinating, I'm a woman, but we're going to make this happen, guys. Get on with it. And that was my early, I guess, philosophy. And now I realise that the shadow I cast is really important for everyone around because anyone who has a protected characteristic will look at someone like me and think, how are they doing it? And what can I learn from that? And how are they treating other people? And is that okay or not? And do I feel that this is someone where I have psychological safety?
Yeah.
And I've had to learn about that. And I've made mistakes.
As we all do.
And I've got it right in some places and wrong in others. But I'm always learning and always hoping to be better.
Well, kind of, how far along do you feel the diversity and inclusion journey? That doesn't make any sense. And how far along the diversity and inclusion journey do you feel that the industry is as a whole? Obviously, I know you mentioned that it's kind of an ongoing process, but kind of where obviously in the past couple of years it has it's getting better, but do you still feel that we're kind of way behind or?
So compared to other sectors I've worked with, it's not bad.
Yeah.
And I definitely can see growth. I mean, that early career, I think that the total number of women on site in the 12,000 was probably less than 1 or 2%. It's tiny proportions of women in any role.
Yeah.
And the last role I did, my team was 46% female, which is really cool. And those with ethnic backgrounds were 26 or 7%. So, it was a really diverse group.
Yeah.
And while I think we've still got a long way to go, those great moments, like a team that has that level of inclusivity and that has a group of people that genuinely represents a diverse cultural background and everyone's different experiences.
Exactly. Yeah.
Those are the things that will help drive others on. So I think we have a way to go. I think that was unusual. Yeah. I don't expect to see that everywhere.
Yeah.
I think HS2 as a project has really shown some massive progress. 20% women in the supply chain is pretty impressive. And I think that was doubling how it started. So it really is a big step up. Wow. And it's been very deliberate.
Yeah.
So that's the learning I've had particularly from HS2 is you need to be deliberate if you want it to change. You can't make excuses and say, oh, it's difficult to find someone to do this job who is has a protected characteristic.
Yeah.
You got to be deliberate and say, no, we are trying to make sure that our adverts are targeted so they are encouraging people and we aren't putting barriers in the way to individuals coming in. And that's something that I think I've learned a lot at HS2 about, and I'm really, really proud of that program for creating a more inclusive environment and therefore having much better diversity stats.
Yeah, because I guess, and I think as well, the more people that do kind of from a diverse background that do apply, it'll kind of be like a domino effect, I feel. Yeah. So more people will be like, well, they look like a fantastic company to work for, full of diversity. I want to work there myself. Yeah. So having those specific kind of advertisements. Well, as you found with that project, with having the 46%, obviously.
That was just my team. I think we were just over 40 as a company, but even so.
Oh, really?
Pretty cool.
So what would you say is the most kind of difficult part of it, implementing a diversity inclusion program, would you say?
Yeah. So creating equity. So if you're going to be an inclusive environment, then everybody needs to bring their best person to work.
Yeah.
And equality is one word, equity is quite a different word. It means that everybody can perform similarly and that things are evened out so that they're able to be the best person they can be. That's quite hard to do, particularly when we have large bodies of people who are doing very different things.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge and something you've got to constantly be looking at and adapting and creating good policy to support. The other thing I think that's pretty important is psychological safety.
Yeah.
So that it's okay to be different. It's okay to have a different perspective. It's okay to bring yourself, whoever you are, to the place that you're working. So there's something that's cultural there and something that's quite policy driven and the way in which the organisation is set up. And those two things I know we get right in some places and get wrong in others. And it's tough when you get it wrong. It hurts. It hurts individuals. It hurts you. You know, and every intent can be good, but the outcomes can be very different. So it's pretty exposing to make a really genuinely inclusive and equitable environment.
I guess it's kind of about building kind of the employees' confidence to feel as though that they don't feel nervous, or because you want their ideas. Having a diverse workforce, obviously, as you said before, everyone's from different backgrounds, everyone's got different ideas. So the more diverse your team is, hopefully, touch with the better ideas that they're going to kind of produce, so the better projects and things like that.
It's certainly been my experience. So the best teams I've been involved in have been diverse, and that'll be protected characteristics, it'll be experience, it'll be age, it'll be, there's lots of different things that contribute to different ways of thinking.
Exactly.
To bringing a really good team together. There are some things that really matter.
Yeah.
So you have to be prepared to play the team game. You can't come in with your own agenda, whatever your background.
Yeah.
So there are some things that aren't about the D&I agenda that matter, and that's a cultural thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I found that the teams I've been involved in where we had, and interestingly, that very first team when I was in manufacturing, in the automotive sector, when I was one of these 3 managers among 12,000, the team I was in, there were about 10 of us. Yeah. I was the one woman, but there were some younger people, older people. There were people who from very, very different backgrounds, some who were university, some who hadn't, some worked their way through. Yeah. And that team was amazing. And we were really powerful as a team to make difficult things happen. Yeah. And that was years ago. That was years. So it's possible. It's always possible. Yeah.
It's just kind of pushing that forward and carrying on in the right direction, isn't it? So what traits would you look for in potential employees?
Yeah. So as you can probably tell, I really love diversity. So people who think differently to me, I think is really important.
Yes.
So if you have a group of people who all think similarly, then you don't get great outcomes in my experience. So and the vaccine task force was a great example of that, where we just brought this rainbow team of people together, didn't know each other at all, never met because we only ever met over Teams.
Yes, it would have been on Teams.
Yeah, we didn't meet until the July after everything had finished. I was already working on HS2. That's how long it was before we actually physically met. But we that ability to think in different ways, and embrace different ideas and be open to challenge and be prepared to challenge, I think delivers great outcomes. As long as it's not destructive and it doesn't, end in some cycle of doom you never get out of. So diversity is really important to me. And the other thing that matters is that we have, I suppose the vaccine task force is a great example. There's an imperative, there's common purpose. Yeah. And there's a team spirit that's trying to achieve that purpose. You're not bringing an individual ego into a room. And I think that's the most destructive things I've seen, is where an individual's brought what they want into a room and isn't prepared to align around the thing that we're trying to achieve as an outcome and recognise the great stuff that comes from the other people in that room too. So it may be called teamwork. For me, it's about not bringing that diverse thinking and being prepared to listen. Yeah, those things will probably all sit together, don't they, quite comfortably.
Yeah. It's like everyone has a voice, but also we are a team. We are as one sort of thing. Yeah. So kind of talk about being as a team. What would you say are the features of being a good leader, and would you describe yourself as a good leader?
I think other people would have to make that decision, wouldn't they?
I'm amazing.
You are. Well done. I want to clap. Is it allowed to clap in the podcast? I don't know. I think you'll be quite courageous as a leader. For me, it's important to be kind.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be sort of soft and fluffy in that kindness. That's not my style of kindness, but being observant to where people are at and what's going on.
Yeah.
Understanding their whole self, not just the self that's come to work, and making sure that you're cognizant of that when you're dealing with challenges together.
Yeah.
For me, passion and drive are a big part of being a leader too. So
yeah.
And maybe that's kind of obvious when you look at my CV, isn't it? But I kind of like to get stuff done, and I'm not that keen on hanging about and thinking about overthinking things. I do like a strategy, don't get me wrong, but I'm also not likely to sort of put us in a circle of things that mean you never get out of thinking about it and you don't get stuff over the line. So passion and drive are really important. It helps to have some knowledge.
Yeah.
And I don't think that has to be overplayed.
Yeah.
Because you're looking for diversity of knowledge too, but having something to bring to the table helps as a leader. And that can take lots of different forms. Being motivating, being able to empower people, all those things. And then probably most important to me is humble. So I don't have a very big ego. I don't particularly need to be stood at the front. I'm quite a big personality. Maybe that's coming across, maybe it's not. But being humble and recognizing that everybody has a part to play and that you're just part of it. And I said earlier about someone who brings their individual ego into a team is a problem for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's because I am quite
humble.
I like to work with a team. I'm quite happy to lead the team, and I'm quite happy to make the difficult decisions. But I also think that you manage large bodies of people.
Yeah.
They've all got to contribute, because if it's just you at the top, it's never going to get done, because you're one person. If you've got 600 people working for you, you need all 600 to be on the game.
They're there for a reason.
Yeah. So you don't need to have a big ego, because you're reliant on them doing a great job, and you're only as good as they are. So you've got to be there to serve them, being the best people they can be.
Exactly.
So I think those are the leadership things I look for. Yeah, with ego being right up there, alongside things like courage, kindness, drive, make it happen, and all those things that are pretty well known, aren't they?
Motivation code. So mentioning drive there, what would you say is your biggest driver?
Yeah, so performance is always at the top of the list for me. Get it done. Whatever it is we need to do, find the right route to do it, however easy, however hard it is, however complex it is, however, how much brain power it needs behind it to make it happen, but making the outcome you expected happen in the most efficient and effective way is at my heart. So I love that. And the other part that's really important to me is the people that I work with. So finding a way for everybody to be the best person they can be and finding the ingredients that allow that to happen is so motivating as a leader.
And to see them flourish.
Or do things that you hadn't realised they knew how to do, or they bring something to the table that you hadn't thought of, or you hadn't known they would be able to do. And it's so cool when you see that happen.
Yeah.
So that mixture of always having an eye on the prize,
of course,
but also recognizing the people and the things that you have around you that enable that to happen, and giving them the space to flourish. Those two things together are what really get me up in the morning.
So, kind of looking back at your career, would there be anything that you would change at all? And if so, why?
No, I wouldn't change anything. I think there are lots of moments when I could have done better, or I might have done something a different way. And there are certainly things that I look at and go, I'm sad that happened. And, I wish that I hadn't done that way. We all make mistakes, don't we?
Yeah,
we're all
it's about
foolish.
learning from those,
But I think that I've had a fantastic career thus far. I've had some fantastic opportunities.
We have.
And I think that... for me, it's about what's next now. So I think I'm reflective, but I'm not a backward looker. I don't spend a lot of time living in the past. I'm always interested in, so what should we do next?
Yeah.
So now we've got this basis of understanding. We've got all this stuff that we've kind of built over time. I've become the person I am now.
Yeah.
How can I use that to its best effect next? What could that lead to? So no, nothing to change, but everything to play for.
Perfect. Well, finishing on that note, it's been fantastic having you on the podcast, Ruth, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the GSC Executives podcast. Today's conversation was hosted and recorded by Caitlin Tye, with editing and production managed by Stephen Smith. The podcast is produced by GSC Executives in conjunction with Daniel Owen Limited. For more details about our executive search solutions, as well as upcoming episodes, please visit our website, gscexecutives.co.uk. If you're keen to hear more industry insights, please consider subscribing on your preferred podcast platform. Until next time, continue to lead with excellence.